Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, and I'm going to be giving you my review of Lucky Day. Sorry, it's a bit late, I woke up late, but my god, I'm glad that I'm here now to talk about this, because going in, I had literally no expectations for this episode. You know, it's a Dr. Light, it's a Ruby-centric story, it's a Pete McTeague story, and none of these things are bad on their own, but I just wasn't convinced that this was going to be a great episode. Boy, am I glad to be wrong. Boy, am I glad that I was wrong on this one. This is another really good, really strong outing from Season 2. In my opinion, we're 4 for 4. Also, subscribe if you're new, that'd be greatly appreciated. We're trying to get to 30,000 subscribers, and any support is really helpful. I thought this was incredible. I thought this was really good, but let's get right into it. So, basic premise. The Doctor lands on New Year's 2007, meets a kid called Conrad. He gives this kid 50p, says it's his lucky day, basically makes him feel special, because we find out that he doesn't really have a great home life. His mum is pretty horrible to him, but then it's revealed that, oh, you know, he's been looking for the TARDIS all this time after he saw it and the Doctor, and he finds someone who knows all about him, and that's Ruby Sunday. So he interviews her for the podcast. Personally, I wouldn't touch this guy with a 10-foot barge pole. If I was Ruby, I'd be like, nah, I ain't being interviewed by him. But they form a connection because she can talk to him about monsters and all of her experiences because he's really interested, which is something that she hasn't had. And we kind of find out essentially that she has a bit of PTSD, and I really love what they did with Ruby's character in this episode. It's always kind of been a question of how companions adapt to normal life after travels with the Doctor. And in this story, we find out that for some, it's not an easy process to go back to normal life. It can be very traumatizing, and we see Ruby basically finding comfort in this new relationship. We see the brief return of the Sundays, Cherry Sunday in particular is a huge highlight, and we basically see them realizing that, oh, you know, she's been mentioning the Doctor less and less as the result of this guy. But obviously the reason she initially interacts with him is because he intercepted an earlier adventure with her and the Doctor back when Season 1 was happening with the Shriek. And the Shriek's whole deal is basically they mark you as future prey using like pheromones, essentially. And so Ruby says, don't worry, there's this antidote, you can take it, and the Shriek won't follow you. And so we think the Shriek are all gone. In fact, we get a shot of Kate Stewart going into the unit vaults, which felt very Torchwood, to confirm, yes, the Shriek is still in there. However, they're still getting electrical outages as they're on a trip to the English countryside, and Ruby is paranoid that something's going on, and she's kinda right, because the Shriek do appear, however, they're not the actual Shriek, and this is where the big plot twist comes in. They are, in fact, actors, paid by Conrad to show unit, and basically be like, oh yeah, these guys aren't real, it's all costumes, it's all fake. And a slight detail I love, is the fact that the Shriek costumes that they wear are like less kind of detailed than the real ones. That's a really nice little touch. And so yes, Conrad reveals that he is a member of Think Tank, which is an organisation that I think dates back all the way to the 70s in Doctor Who lore. It's kind of a rival to UNIT, which makes a lot of sense. And he basically tries to expose them, and naturally, because he is like, oh, I'm going to expose the truth, everyone latches onto it. You know, he's on all the news stations, he's on social media everywhere, everyone loves it. But then he takes it a step further. He tries to infiltrate unit headquarters, and he even shoots down a guy who tries to stop him. And this is, for me, where the highlight of the episode is. Kate Lethbridge Stewart. Now, people will know, if they know me, that I've never been a massive Kate Lethbridge Stewart fan. I've always kind of found her a little bit, you know, kind of dull, personally. But this is by far her best outing. We get the slight reveal that she is going out with Colonel Ibrahim, which was kind of implied in the previous season, so good to see that, you know, carrying forward. But I love the way she confronts him. You've put the lives of everyone at risk, because, I mean, he exposes their addresses, you know, it's a very serious thing, and she goes, you've destroyed everything that me and my father built, all of this for some attention and for some lies, because throughout the episode, you can tell that he is very much attention seeking. He's like, oh, you know, we're a team, like you and the Doctor. Yeah, you and the Doctor. The Doctor. He still wants to be like the Doctor, even though he doesn't fully believe in the Doctor. I think he wants to be that. And it's revealed that Conrad was interviewed by UNIT years ago. And she goes, you know the one thing I found? Don't trust him. But we kind of get this whole thing of, which is kind of a commentary on like echo chambers and disinformation and all this sort of stuff. Because no matter what they say or what they do, he still doesn't believe it's real. I mean, and to prove it, Kate goes, alright, we'll unleash the monster on you then. We'll see how you like it. Which is a very dark thing for her to do. And I did think, oh, that's a bit far. However, everyone else at UNIT also thinks that that's a bit far. So that's good that that got called out. And of course it makes sense because, as I said, as far as she's aware, all the work that her and her father and her legacy is at risk because of this man. And all the people that they try and keep safe are at risk as a result. Because if they get defunded, you know, then things go wrong. We saw that in the Chibnall era, you know. So she lets the monster loose on him, but even still, even after all of that, Conrad still doesn't believe it's real. And I do also have to give a massive shout out to Jonah Hua King, who plays Conrad, because he plays this expertly. You know, initially, you do feel sympathetic towards him. I did get slight sus vibes from him throughout, but I think you're supposed to. But initially, I thought maybe, okay, he's just insecure. You know, he's just kind of insecure and, you know, maybe he had a poor upbringing. But it's even revealed that his mum's still alive, and it's a lie. She's living in the south of France at his expenses as a result of this podcast, and it's like, oh my God. And I love some of the things that he says because they're so nasty, but so accurate to the way people like that would actually act. I mean, the fact that, like, he points at Shirley, by the way, shout out Shirley, I love Shirley, and goes, oh, this one's definitely collecting benefits. Like, oh my God, I audibly gasped when he said that. And obviously, even saying Ruby Sunday, that's a ridiculous name, which it kind of is, and we were all saying it. Yeah, there definitely does seem to be kind of commentary on the idea of not only conspiracizing, but also being a Doctor Who fan. Like, the bit that got me was right at the end where he said, oh, well, you know, at least your special effects are improving. And then it bites him. And then obviously he gets sent to prison. And the Doctor stages an intervention with him. And he's like, look, mate, you hurt my friend. You are the worst type of person. And I loved Ncuti's darkness here. You can tell he's annoyed because his friend was, you know, his friend was hurt. His friend was lied to. And all of UNIT was put into danger, and all the people in UNIT were put into danger. And I love the bit where Conrad says, have you met Belinda Chandra yet? So now we find out where the Doctor knew Belinda Chandra from Conrad. Conrad tells him before he meets her. And then the Doctor goes, well, if you want spoilers, you die alone. And it's like, oh my God. It's very dark for this Doctor, but I needed that. I needed a bit of that darkness. It reminds me a bit of when, you know, things like the 10th Doctor banishing the family of blood. You know, it's that level of, oh, there's some fire here. Get too close and you will get burned that I've always loved in the Doctor. And it makes sense because, as I said, the one thing he will not tolerate is his friends being hurt. So that's great. But then, you know, the Doctor leaves. He goes, all right, fine. Clicks his fingers. The TARDIS is gone. Loved that as a little transition shot. That was fantastic. But then, of course, someone comes in jingling the keys to Conrad's prison cell. And who is it but Mrs. Flood? So Mrs. Flood clearly teams up with Conrad for some ulterior purpose. And I absolutely adored that. Everything in this episode, it had twists and turns. It had a great vibe with the horror. My only criticism, honestly, is I think some of the dialogue was a bit stilted in places. But there was also some really good lines too. But that's my only general kind of thought. This is by far Pete McTeague's best story, and it's not even close as far as I'm concerned. Like, the tension, the drama, the twists, fantastic. Genuinely fantastic. I was really worried about this one going in, that it wouldn't be as good, and, you know, it kind of stalled the momentum of the season. But if anything, it's gotten me even more excited to see how on earth this gets resolved. Like, what on earth are they going to do in order to get this resolved? Like, perhaps that's a slight concern, you know, how do you resolve this all in 4 episodes? I have seen some people kind of say that, oh yeah, this episode feels like unnecessary. I Can't agree. I think that this was incredibly good, but also incredibly important to the wider series arc. Like, I've seen people call it Love and Monsters 2. Also, yeah, shout out to the bit where Conrad's like, oh, you'll die like your father did. Everything for nothing. And you can see the anger in Kate's face. It's so good. I also kind of got the vibe that Kate kind of sees Ruby as a bit of a surrogate daughter figure. Ruby calls her when they're in this English village, and Kate's like, oh, you know, I always have time for you. And there's kind of that hug towards the end. So I definitely got the sense that, you know, Kate kind of sees Ruby as a bit of a sort of daughterish figure, which is funny because she already has, you know, like 2 mums and a grandmum and all of that. And I liked that. I liked that Louise is part of the family furniture. She's been welcomed in, but obviously she's not always around. And, you know, Carla is still primary person. I liked that a lot. I thought that was all handled very well. Yeah, man. I don't know what to say. I thought this was great. But yeah, overall, I'm kind of stunned. I wasn't expecting this to be as good as it was. I really am surprised. And I also kind of liked the fact that, like, the Doctor talking about, you know, oh, all this noise and all these people and all these cowards spreading lies and misinformation, and it kind of felt like a response, in a way, to all the stuff surrounding this era and surrounding the bigotry towards it. I will say the script isn't particularly subtle about, like, you know, what it's going for here. But, you know, that's RTD for you, and also, obviously, I know it was written by Pete McTee, but it's still in the RTD era. But quite honestly, I think it works in this case. People like Conrad are just this outspoken and are also this lauded by the media. You know, anyone who exposes anything is always going to be kind of elevated by the media, which he was. And I really love what it does to Ruby and how it affects her, you know. The fact that she thought she finally found someone to confide in, and she finally felt at peace with her life and where she was at after the Doctor, only to have that ripped away from her by this complete betrayal by Conrad. I thought it was very, very well done. But you also kind of get where, like, people who follow Conrad are coming from. You know, as far as they're concerned, this massive building worth millions just pops up in the middle of London one day, and all this weird stuff goes on around it. And they're like, hang on a minute, we're funding this giant building in the middle of London. So you totally get where their skepticism comes from, but Conrad weaponizes that for his own gain, you know, for his own podcast, for his own financial gain, but also to feel important, to feel like a martyr. Yeah, I just thought all of that stuff was really, really good. And I really like that this unit has gotten called out, because we see it even at the start of the Star Beast. You know, they violently, you know, throw that guy who's reporting on the Meeps landing into a truck, and this unit can be more violent occasionally and kind of do things that are that step over the line. So whilst, you know, Conrad is definitely the villain of the piece, for sure, and you do feel sympathetic towards the unit crew, you definitely understand where they're coming from, and they're not entirely wrong, which I think makes it a lot more interesting as a piece. It'd be a lot weaker, I think, in my opinion, if Unit were treated just as the unequivocal good guys, which obviously they are the good guys in a sense, but there are those moments where they do go too far, where they are pushing the line, and I think that really does elevate it quite a bit. And I think it sets up War Between the Land and the Sea very well as well, because obviously we're entering this world now where everyone's aware of Unit, but also everyone's very skeptical of Unit. I can imagine that even with Conrad being exposed like that, there'll be some people who still believe him. You know, no matter what, some people will still believe that, oh yeah, you know, Unit aren't real, you know, the monsters are all fake, it's all actors, you know, it's all some weird experiment by, like, the government and by, you know, some kind of massive, like, entity. I also want to shout out the direction of this episode. The bit where Ruby is telling him about the shriek, and it all goes dark, and, you know, the thing is behind her. It's like, oh, it's all so well directed. The pacing was great. The performances from everyone. As I said, I think Gemma Redgrave and Jonah Hua King are the two highlights. Really liked what they did with Ruby's character, kind of giving her this PTSD of the adventures. We obviously don't see the Doctor and Belinda much. In fact, we only see Belinda at the start of the story, where they land in 2007. And I do like how joyous the 50th Doctor is at finding a 50p. I think that's really cute and really fun. But obviously, the ending scene that I was talking about where he confronts Conrad is fantastic. He gives a great performance there. I know that some people will feel the absence of the Doctor, and I did as well to a certain extent because I do really like Shusey, but I think that's offset by the additional thrill that comes from the fact that he's not here. And, you know, Kate saying, oh, you know, I'm glad he's not here because he would have stopped me showing you this. You know, stuff like that, I think, because if the Doctor was there, he'd have shut that down immediately. But the fact that he wasn't means that she could go that step further over the line, could show him that stuff, could kind of put him in danger, and put people in danger. To be fair, though, UNIT needs to get better security, you know. They had that inside guy for Conrad in this episode. You also got Harriet Harbinger, who turns out to be obviously a Harbinger for Sutekh. They need to get better vetting systems. I mean, they caught Conrad early on, but yeah, they need to double check before they start employing people. Also, yeah, shout out to Trinity Wells. We get another Trinity Wells cameo. That was very fun. I do think it's interesting that they've kind of taken her in almost the Alex Jones-esque direction. I think that's interesting, because she was a very straight-laced reporter in RTD1, but in RTD2, she's a much more conspiratorial figure. You know, in the giggle, she's like, I'm anti-Z-Dex. And obviously, in this episode, she's very much skeptical of UNIT because of what Conrad's saying. I mean, to be fair, I guess that the skepticism of UNIT would probably go back to the Z-Dex as well, thinking about it. I thought it was fantastic. Oh, I also love the references to the Cybermen and the Yeti, and all that was great. Let me know what you guys think. Subscribe if you're new, like if you enjoy, and I'll see you later.